Hi, my name is Ryan Boyd, Executive Director of Wakefield Community Access Television. I'm joined today by Senator Jason Lewis and Dave Gauthier, Executive Director of Winchester Community Access and Media and President of MassAccess. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
So we're here today to discuss a couple of bills that are going through the legislature right now. So Senator Lewis, you filed two bills this session of particular relevance to community television stations like ours. The first one is an act to modernize participation in public meetings. So I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about this proposal and what that'll mean for Massachusetts communities?
Absolutely, and Ryan and David, it's great to be with you and be back in the studio together. I've been a longtime fan of our local community media stations. I've worked with all of the community media stations throughout the district that I represent for many years now, and view you as so important to the fabric of our communities in terms of the community dialogue, public participation, enabling the public to know what's happening in local government, in education. And so that's why I was very interested in filing in the state Senate this session these two bills that we're going to be talking about, during this discussion. The first bill has to do with ensuring that even after the pandemic hopefully is finally over and we get back to a more normal kind of life, that we continue to allow for remote participation for the public in local government meetings. So think about town council, select board, school committee, planning board, et cetera. During the pandemic, one of the small silver linings has been that because of remote participation, many people who previously would have had a difficult time participating in government discussions and meetings and having their voice heard have been able to participate. Think about people with disabilities and mobility issues who may not be able to get to town hall or wherever the meeting's being held. Folks who have transportation challenges, seniors who may not want to go out at night, parents with young children and they have childcare challenges. So it's opened up participation, and we want to make sure that even after the pandemic, when we go back to having in-person meetings, which I do think is important, I do think public officials should be able to be there in person. And some members of the public also prefer to attend in person, and we want to continue to give them that option. But at the same time, also make sure that those public meetings are accessible to people who want to participate remotely. And of course, our local community media plays a critical role in enabling that to happen.
Absolutely. And Dave, so like the senator just said, stations like ours often take the lead in this sort of thing, hosting these meetings, putting them on, airing them, getting them streamed online and all of that. So what do you think a bill like this, what kind of impact do you think that'll have on local stations throughout Massachusetts?
Well, I think first and foremost, Ryan, we're in support of the bill, and we should be in support of the bill. It's an accessibility issue, and I think this is something, like Senator Lewis said, that's very good for residents of the Commonwealth so that they may participate regardless of any disability or any shortcoming that they may have. So I think it's an important thing to consider, but there are some considerations that we would have to make on the community media side. So if you're doing more meetings, you're needing more equipment, you're needing more infrastructure, you're needing more person power. So obviously that costs more money. So in a time where we're seeing increased demand, we're also seeing decreased funding in community media. So that's an untenable equation that we're sort of dealing with now. So when you think about the meetings that we've been covering, and you said something before we got started, it's something that was like 5 times as many meetings as you would normally do in a calendar year you've done this year in Wakefield. And that's yeoman's work. It's really commendable. But that costs you. There's a little bit of something extra that you all need to do as a staff of the Community Media Center to deliver that service to the community. So it is important that it's done. And, I often think a in-person meeting, we sort of have a handle on that, right? Mm-hmm. We understand where the cameras should be and how to gather the audio. A Zoom meeting is typically fairly easy to do as well. You're taking the output of that and you're sending it over your airwaves in lieu of all of those cameras. When it's a hybrid meeting, that's when things sort of get a little bit more difficult, because now you run the danger of causing loops with your audio and video, and that's when we run into danger. So that's where the actual research and funding needs to go to get the correct equipment in place so that you're not causing any feedback and you're still able to deliver quality content back to the residents.
And to build off of that too, I would say, talk to any access station, across the state, across the country, and most likely you're going to hear them all say, "Yeah, we want to do this. We want to provide more for the community. We are here for that. That's what we do." But like you said, finding the infrastructure for it, finding the money to pay for the equipment needed to get that there is a really important topic. And I'm glad you brought it up because we also the second bill.
Sorry, Ryan, can I just
please.
add one more thing? I think David used a term that I think is very important for our listeners to hear and think about, and that is this notion of hybrid public meetings. That's the key. That's what we're trying to, I think, accomplish. That should be the goal going forward. And that is where you do have a physical, in-person meeting, because again, I think it's important that public elected officials should be there whenever they can, physically present, to be able to interact directly with their constituents, with the media, with each other. Some members of the public like to attend meetings in person, and we don't want to take that away from them either. And then again, but allow that remote option for those. So that is really what we're talking about, is a hybrid format. But as you've both pointed out, that's technically more complicated, and that's why your role is so important, and that's why we need to provide more support, to our community media, so that you have the equipment you need, the capital, the staffing, to be able to support these hybrid events. And one of the other things I am pushing at the state level would be some additional funding for technical support and to purchase equipment to help enable these hybrid public meetings to be able to take place, particularly in our smaller communities that will have smaller budgets.
That would be a tremendous help. I know that. So one of the other bills you've introduced this year is an act relative to digital entertainment on public rights of way. So please tell us, tell the community, tell those watching, what is that, and what should members of the public do to help support this bill, and what do they need to know about it?
Yeah, so this bill is really critically important, and I'm really proud to be the Senate lead sponsor of the bill, alongside Representative Joan Machino, who's the lead sponsor of the same bill in the House of Representatives, and she's doing great work on this issue too. So, and David will speak to this in more detail because he's the state expert when it comes to how this all works. But just at a high level, our local cable access or community media stations, and there's over 300, right, across Massachusetts in large and small cities and towns, are funded through essentially cable TV franchise fees, and those get negotiated at the municipal level, and it's been that way for a long time, and that system has worked quite well. What's the problem? As everybody knows, people are cutting the cord, so to speak, and they are ending their subscriptions to cable TV, and they're just using getting video content through streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others. When they do that, that revenue stream that has been flowing to our municipalities, to our community media, is drying up. And that is a big problem for the future of community media. And as I said at the outset, community media is playing an even more important role today than in the past in providing access for the community to local government, for people to know what's going on in their community, to participate, to be educated. We've seen a decline in media more generally, particularly local media, which is very unfortunate, but again makes it even more important that local community media or cable access stations have the funding they need to prosper. And so this bill would apply a small, modest fee on streaming services that would make up for that loss in revenue from cable, and would basically put them on a level playing field. So it's also a fairness issue as well.
Absolutely. Dave?
Yeah, I think the Senator did a great job of describing the bill. And the issue is that we believe that streaming companies are sort of using the same public rights of way that cable companies are using to deliver content to subscribers. That's all, when Senator Lewis mentions this federal law regarding cable, it's all written in use of public right of way. So they're using telephone poles and underground conduits, and even if they're just using telephone poles, they're running those telephone poles in public land. They are obligated to give back to the municipality for the use of that public right of way. Cable has been doing that for decades. Streaming companies are not doing that. So they are not giving anything back for that same usage. So what we're looking at here is an update to existing law. We're looking to, as the technology has gotten better, we're looking to update the law so that it's beneficial to the residents of Massachusetts. This is not a money grab for community media. In fact, it's a split of that cost. So we're talking about 20% of it staying with the state, about 40% of it going back to the municipalities in their general fund, and about 40% going back to those community media centers serving those municipalities. So this is an update to existing law. This is not something new. This is something that's being done in over a dozen other states across the country. Those are done in the form of a sales tax. There are some states, as you know, who don't have a sales tax. So in most other states is being considered, because people are starting to look at this and saying, okay, we need to update this law, or because all of that federal legislation is written using that term cable. These companies are not cable, they are classified differently. So this is a way to catch up with the technology and having lawmakers catch up in that, so that we're leveling the playing field for everybody.
I was going to ask a couple other questions. I think you might have already answered them, but I think it's probably bears repeating anyway. So there are other bills out there in other states, other major cities that are already doing something like this. This is not a groundbreaking situation here. Do we know how many are out, how many have already passed, and what the benefits people have seen from those bills?
There are some situations that have been, taxing digital goods for over a decade, and those states are doing very well. That's a nice means of income for them. To our knowledge, Massachusetts is the first to use this public right-of-way argument, and to understand why, I think it's important to understand why Massachusetts is a little bit special when it comes to community media. Here in Massachusetts, we have the highest concentrations of media centers in the country. All right, and Senator Lewis mentioned local franchising, and that's a big part of it. Not every state enjoys that same local franchising obligation. So, a lot of times they're done at a statewide level. So you have regional centers. Here in Massachusetts, there's almost a center for every municipality. So it's a wonderful stronghold of community media here in Massachusetts. So as we try to protect that local voice and that freedom of speech bastion that we support, we do need more funding, because we've seen over 15% loss in funding across the state in just the last 3 years, and that slope continues to become greater and greater as people go to different entertainment options.
Back in January, I've quoted this a few times in articles we've written up for the local newspaper and things, but Forbes magazine predicts that 27% of U.S. households this year alone are going to cut the cord on cable. And that's that's a devastating number for stations like this all across the country. And so, for us, a bill of this type is vital. It's necessary, and it's so important for like you said, sort of the survival, for the well-being of community media centers all across the state, all across the nation, really. But here in Massachusetts, it's just such an important part of the local government transparency, that giving people their voice, that they want to share their story or their passion, or create a podcast, create a show, make a documentary, a movie, whatever it might be. But we often say here that we are here for you. We are here for the community, for the people here in town who want to stay up to date with what's happening in the local municipality and the meetings that are being covered. And that's why we try so hard to be everywhere we can possibly be, to cover local events, whether it's a high school graduation, local sports, local government meetings, anything and everything that is requested of us. We say no only when we have to, when there's and it's only because of a lack of resources on our part, because we run out of time or people. And it's just I want to thank you for sort of fighting the good fight, both of you. Because it's a big deal. It's a big deal for these stations and for all of us to have this happen.
Well, it's important that we educate our fellow citizens, and because many people appreciate and value having community media, but don't really know that this is an existential threat. And while this is a challenge all over the country, right, because people are cutting the cord, so to speak, with cable everywhere, as David has pointed out, it sort of hits us particularly hard because we in Massachusetts have we have such a long tradition of home rule, which basically means we do a lot of government at the local level, right? A lot of other states do it at the county level, regional. We do a lot of things, run our schools at the local level, run our towns and cities, our planning boards, our conservation commissions, all kinds of things that happen at the local level, which we really pride ourselves on in Massachusetts. And town meetings are a great example that, they go back hundreds and hundreds of years. So because of the unique nature of how we conduct our public affairs, it makes the nature of community media even more important than it might be in some other places. And again, why we need to solve this problem. And I think we're flexible, right? If we can't do the streaming fee that is proposed in this bill exactly as we propose it, we're open to having a conversation. We're open to structuring it maybe slightly differently. But the important thing is we have this conversation. We make sure that this is a priority, with my colleagues on Beacon Hill, because the challenge is thousands of different bills that are competing for attention. So we need to focus on this particular issue, get it as a priority, and then we can solve it, whether we do it exactly the way the bill is written, or whether we are flexible in exactly how we structure this fee on streaming services. I think we're certainly open to that, but we've just got to make this a priority.
Yeah, I would agree. And in the vein that you were speaking of, Ryan, I think you mentioned that a lot of people are cutting the cord and going away. And I would say that, although the means of gathering information or gathering entertainment may be changing, the need for that local media is not changing, right? So if anything, that's growing, right? We saw that during the pandemic. How many times, did you have, a hockey game or a basketball game? Parents weren't allowed in the stands at all. So the only way that they were able to watch their kids a lot of times was to turn on community media. And oftentimes we're there streaming live and carrying those games so that parents and grandparents and families can see that participation. It's an important part of life. So that need is not going away. We are certainly flexible in the way that we are structuring the bill, but we do want to see something like this pass, and it can't be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It has to be a conversation that happens now. And we understand that community media is not always top of mind for everybody. And it's not the most important bill that's up at the State House, certainly. There are bills that are being considered that may save lives or cure diseases, and we're all for that. But we do need to raise our hands a little bit and say, okay, well, if you respect and enjoy this service that is being provided, we are going to need a little help going forward because, as I mentioned earlier, we are in a situation where the demand is going up and the revenue is going down. So something has to give there, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
So how do we get this the attention it needs within the legislature, within your colleagues that are working so hard every day? How do we make them say, you know what, Dave's right here. There are other there are bills here that are going to save lives and change lives forever. This also is a necessary and important thing to pay attention to.
It's a great question, and as I mentioned a moment ago, the challenge is that there are so many bills that are pending before the legislature, and they address a lot of important issues. Again, this being I think we all agree an important issue in its own right. So what really needs to happen is that more state legislators, both state representatives and state senators, need to hear from their constituents that they care about this issue and that they don't want to see community media die a slow death. And that would be very sad and would really hurt civic engagement and public participation. So that's really an education process, and that's like why we're doing the show today, right? We're trying to get the word out to people, and we need to do more of this so that ordinary citizens will email or call or text message or go to office hours, whatever they prefer, to their state rep and state senator, and let them know, hey, I think this is an issue we'd really like you to focus on. And the more legislators, hear from their constituents, the more we're going to build support and momentum for this bill. We're off to a great start. I think we've been doing a lot of good work all across the Commonwealth, and we just need to really step that up.
Yeah, we just had a conversation this morning when I was encouraging some of our members of MassAccess to, even if your rep or senator has already co-signed on the bill, they can still make a phone call over to one of the joint committees and say, I just wanted to check in and see how this bill is doing. It's really important to my constituents. I think it's an important thing, and I won't speak for the senator, but I think it's an important thing to hear from your own colleagues and to hear what's important in their communities.
It definitely is. Definitely is.
I mean, I know that every month our Chamber of Commerce hosts a breakfast at a local restaurant, and oftentimes Representative Wong will be there. We'll talk to him about this issue, about other ones that we all have. And I think in your own communities, in your own towns, if anything like that is out there for you, it's a great opportunity to really be face to face with your representative, with your senator, to talk to them about some of these issues that you have. So I would just
totally
encourage
agree
everybody.
with that. And I want to just say to folks, don't be intimidated. Your state rep, state senator wants to hear from you. I really value the interactions I have with the constituents I represent in our communities. I love hearing from people, whether they come to see me during office hours, whether they will send us an email or come to the State House. We haven't been doing so much of that lately, unfortunately, but that will start up again soon. Bottom line, legislators, and this is true for local elected officials too, like to hear from their constituents, and so encourage people to reach out.
So one last thing, if I could ask. So I know that there was a committee hearing held recently. Can we talk a little bit about sort of how it went, or where are we at this point in the bill and along the progress?
So the House contingent had a hearing in front of the Joint Committee, and I may botch this. It's a new committee. Advanced IT, the Internet, and Cybersecurity. So that's where that side of things currently sits. And I know that Rep. Moschino and Rep. Tucker are speaking to the chairs over there to try to get a favorable recommendation out of that Joint Committee. On the Senate side, it has been assigned to Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, and to this point, I don't think we've had a hearing date announced just yet. As we record this here at the beginning of December, we're still awaiting a hearing in front of TUE, and we'll go through that same process and sort of make our case there, and let the Joint Committee know why we think this is an important deal, and invite other people to give testimony and to hopefully get a positive recommendation out of that Joint Committee. Where it goes from there sometimes is a little bit of a mystery, and I'm sure Senator Lewis can speak to that a little bit better. But we're about halfway through a 2-year session at this point, so hopefully we would see some resolution. Whether the fate of the bill, we'll know hopefully within the next 8 to 10 months, I would hope.
Yeah, exactly. As David said, we're in the middle of the legislative process right now. The bill that I filed and the bill that Rep. Machino and I know Rep. Tucker from Salem has been very supportive, it's the same one bill, basically, but one's filed in the Senate, one was filed in the House. Usually, when in that case, they'll go to the same committee to review. In this case, they happen to go to 2 different committees. But in fact, that gives us 2 bites at the apple, is one way to look at it.
Sure.
So each bill gets a public hearing. As David said, the House version had its public hearing. The Senate one will be coming up. That's a chance for members of the public to weigh in. So that's a good opportunity, again, when the Senate bill comes up. You can also submit testimony to the committee chairs and the committee members. You could, as simple as sending an email. So anybody can, that's another great way to support the bills, is send an email to the chairs of that committee. You can look that up online, or you can go through your own rep or senator. They'll pass it on for you. And then those committees, those 2 committees that David mentioned, will hopefully give the bills a thumbs up, which means it then gets to move on in the legislative process. Ultimately, what needs to happen is the bill, whether it's the House or the Senate version, doesn't really matter, needs to get scheduled to come to the floor of the House and the Senate. And there's unfortunately not many bills that do get scheduled, so that's why we need all this activism and hard work to ultimately get the bill to come to the floor of one of the branches, and after that we'd go to the other branch, and then Governor Baker's desk would be hopefully the last step in this journey.
Okay, so I guess as executive directors of these stations, we really need to make sure we are out there. We're talking to folks within our community. We're MassAccess. We're talking to a larger part of the community, and really pushing for folks to write their representatives, write their senators for support of this.
Sure, and I think you talked about silver linings earlier, and I'll just say that if anything, the pandemic has sort of brought community media back into the limelight, so to speak, whereas we sort of took a back seat after people started carrying around video cameras in their pockets, and you could have a worldwide audience on YouTube at the tap of a button. So the Community Media Center was less pressing, I think, in the minds of people. But now I think people are starting to understand that, well, this stuff doesn't happen automatically. These games, these meetings, all of these things that are covered, all these municipal events that I get to see either on TV or most of the times on the internet, your YouTube or your Wakefield website. Someone's got to do that. Someone's got to organize that. Someone's got to record it. Someone's got to edit it. Someone's got to post it and all of that stuff. So there's a process behind that. And I think if you let people know that we love doing what we do, but we need the support, hopefully people will get out there and support what you're doing.
Absolutely.
I'm sure they will.
Any closing remarks either of you would like to say?
I would just say thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us. It's important for us to be able to talk about it and share the information.
Absolutely, and just really glad to have this conversation. Really, again, want to encourage anybody who's interested and supportive of local media and supporting civic engagement, public participation in government, to support these 2 bills. Maybe we can share, the bill titles and the bill numbers again before we air the show, and look forward to hopefully getting these bills across the finish line in the not too distant future.
Excellent, Senator, Mr. Gauthier, thank you both so much for being here, and thank you for tuning in. And remember, support your local community access stations. Thank you.